Hi, my name's Tony Chapman. I'm the host of Chatter That Matters. In this age of noise, I cut through the chaos and confusion to focus on what matters most to your life and your livelihood. And on this episode, I chat with...
Typically, when America sneezes, we've caught a cold. What can we do as a country to make sure we stand taller than the gong show we're seeing in the States, but more importantly, protect ourselves going forward, that we're not as dependent on something that might very quickly fail?
Well, obviously, I mean, our economies are so intertwined that it's difficult, and the sheer scale of the American presence in the world is going to affect us directly. But on the other hand, I think that Canada has become a much more mature country in my lifetime and a more confident country in my lifetime. I think that as we watch the tragedy of America, where we suddenly have the breakdown of the American family, the average American youth by 18 spending 2 and 3 years watching video games or computer screens, the fact that the country consumes 2/3 of the world's antipsychotic drugs, the fact that it has an opioid epidemic reflective of this discrepancy of wealth, the absence of a social safety net. We see a country that within 3 months every year has more people killed by handguns than died on D-Day in 1944. But the more we see of America's failures, frankly, I think the easier it will be for us to find pride in what we do well. And the bottom line is we do have a social contract. There's a great story, Tony, when Jan Morris, a great British travel writer, and she had bumped into a Canadian. And of course, what did the Canadian say? I'm sorry, right? But what Jan didn't understand is that the phrase in Canada, I'm sorry, is not an apology. It's a mantra. It's a way of saying, look, we live in this impossible country where the weight of the North hovers in our imagination. For most of our history, there were more lakes than people, and we get along with each other. We're a country of grace and conciliance and cooperation and community, and you didn't want to whack me, and I didn't want to get whacked by you. So you're not apologizing to the person, you're regretting the moment. That's what I'm sorry means.
So if you were advising our prime minister, what advice would you bring that individual in terms of everything you learned about studying those thousands of cultures, the work you've done with Indigenous in North and South America, your study of America? What would you advise us to do as a country that'll make us feel proud about who we are, but at the same time have an economy possibly less reliant on America?
I think in general, we want to emphasize education, real education, and education for everybody. We want to remove the stain of our prison system, which, in the States famously, although African Americans are 13% of the population, they make up well over 50% of prison inmates. Well, we have the same shameful record with First Nations in the prisons of Canada. I think we need to find meaningful ways to reform the Indian Act and really pay attention to the fact that we are, as John Ralston Saul says, a Métis nation, and we were a settler society. We have to do what we can urgently to overcome this laziness where we've allowed ourselves, one of the most highly educated populace in the world, incredibly entrepreneurial, innovative, and yet we continue to elect politicians who tell us the only way we can make a living is to compromise our patrimony through resource extraction. The fact that in British Columbia, where before COVID, the vast majority of jobs and economic promise lay in technology, innovation, tourism, filmmaking, creative arts, we have to become an idea and a knowledge-based society fully. I'm not in any way against extractive industries per se, but Canada deserves better than an economy that continues in an almost 19th century way to tear down our forests and tear apart our mountains. That would be a direction that I would try to take our future.
I want to just finish by just talking about, you got a new book out. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I've always had a great love of Colombia. My mother, when I was 14, told me Spanish was the language of the future, and she sent me to Colombia at the age of 14. I felt like I had finally found home, and I returned when I was 19 and became a botanical explorer. And one thing or another drew me back to Colombia, and I realized that it was just so unfair, the image that Colombia had acquired, the psychological impact on young kids to live in a pariah nation, as it was seen because of cocaine, especially the irony, in fact, that most Colombians have never seen or used cocaine. And yet cocaine has been the fuel that has driven the engine of the war, a war that took 220,000 lives, 100,000 disappeared, 7 million internally displaced, 5 million forced to flee their country. The feeling I had is that the responsibility for Colombia's miseries lay largely with everybody who's ever used cocaine, and every government that has facilitated the black market by prohibiting its circulation and distribution and without doing anything to curb that distribution, right? So I felt like I had an obligation to the country to tell the truth. And so the book takes a river that is the Mississippi of Colombia. It's a corridor of commerce, it's a fountain of culture. It's the Magdalena River that flows the length of the country, south to north. It is a fountain of prayer and music and literature, and the river is a story of Colombia. And so Hector Abad, who is a wonderful Colombian writer, said that the Magdalena is a love letter to the country. And his father was assassinated, and it was one of the handful of deaths that shook the entire country. Hector famously was embittered by this and has always been in conflict about his country. And he says that only Wade, because we're good friends, only Wade could, through this, the writing and the storytelling, make me love my country again. Somehow in the strange world of Colombia and the war and the peace and the challenge of the peace, I've just emerged as sort of a figure who can speak to both sides of the conflict. And I feel that it's kind of an incredible privilege to have that opportunity. And for that role, I was made an honorary citizen of Colombia in 2018 by President Juan Manuel Santos. President Santos, in the last paragraph of his upcoming memoir, cites Magdalena, the book, and thanks me. And I couldn't have a bigger honor than that. He's the man who made possible the peace in Colombia.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Listen, I've taken a lot of your time. I've got a beautiful interview. I thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours. It's just such incredibly inspirational and insightful, which is more than I can ask for.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tony.